How dare you trick me? I glared at him, seething. I wasn't entirely faking, he protested. There were real moments of peril. You're still lying, I hissed. What was the point of all this? He leaned closer, a playful smile on his lips. I was drowning. In love. With you. Chapter 1. The spark of ambition. I made it. Standing under the grand archway of the country's most prestigious securities firm, I felt the weight of my ambitions settle in my chest. A mixture of nerves and raw determination. Years of relentless study had paid off. I, Mia Parker, a small-town girl with big dreams, had become one of their newest recruits. The orientation dinner was held in a dazzling hall with glittering chandeliers that seemed to mock my modest upbringing. I adjusted my modest but elegant dress and tried to suppress my anxiety. As the evening progressed, one by one, new recruits introduced themselves. The room was filled with chatter, laughter, and the occasional awkward stumble over words. Then, it was my turn. I rose, legs steady despite my racing heart, and spoke. I'm honored to be here and determined to become one of the top traders. A quiet murmur passed through the crowd. No, I corrected myself, chin lifted defiantly. The top trader. There was a beat of silence, then polite applause. As I sat back down, I felt a mix of pride and a hint of embarrassment. Was I too bold? Too cocky? The thought gnawed at me, but I shook it off. I was young. Ambition wasn't a crime. You sure don't lack confidence, a voice murmured beside me, tinged with amused challenge. I turned to see a young woman with sharp eyes and a mischievous smile. That's him, you know, she said, gesturing with her chin. Who? I asked, still trying to place her name. The top trader. She tilted her head towards the stage. All eyes were now on a man stepping forward, tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding a quiet confidence that drew the attention of the entire room. His tailored suit seemed effortless, but it was his eyes, sharp, calculating, and a touch cold, that sent a ripple through the crowd. I'm glad to welcome all of you, he began. His voice was deep, with a charisma that made it hard to look away. To those aspiring to be the best, remember, the market respects no one, only results. Wow, he's intense, I muttered under my breath. He's Adrian Ross, top trader for 3 years running, the woman beside me whispered. If you're serious about being number one, you'll have to get through him, but don't get any ideas. She leaned closer, a wicked smile playing on her lips. He's a hunter in every sense of the word. I rolled my eyes. Not my type, I said dismissively, and I meant it. Adrian Ross might be devastatingly attractive with his piercing gaze and confident demeanor, but I wasn't like other women who swooned at his mere presence. My priorities were different. I had grown up in a poor hometown, watching my parents toil endlessly. For me, financial stability and success weren't desires, they were necessities. A charming smile wasn't about to derail my focus. In the days that followed, it was impossible not to notice Adrian, not just because of his professional reputation, but because of the company he kept. I would often catch glimpses of him walking through the office with various women, each strikingly different, but always beautiful. There was one who caught my attention more than the others, a woman named Isabella Rivera. She had long, jet-black hair that shimmered under the fluorescent lights, an elegant figure poured into tailored dresses, and a voice that carried the melodic smoothness of practiced charm. Their interactions were polished, each move precise, as if they were performing a well-rehearsed dance. Whether it was meeting clients or negotiating deals, Isabella was often by his side, a perfect complement to his confident demeanor. I couldn't help but notice how heads turned when she entered the room, a stark contrast to the quiet determination I exuded. I knew I wasn't unattractive. In fact, I had been told I was pleasantly striking, with features that were warm and inviting. But I was no competition for her level of allure, and that didn't bother me. I was here for one reason only, to be the best. One afternoon, I was reviewing a complex trade scenario when a shadow fell over my desk. I looked up, and there Adrian was. Want some advice? Adrian asked casually, leaning against my desk with an infuriating smirk. No thank you, I replied coolly, refusing to meet his eyes. He chuckled, a low sound that drew a few curious glances from nearby colleagues. Suit yourself. And just like that, he walked away. That wasn't the last of our encounters. I watched him charm clients effortlessly, his smile disarming even the toughest negotiators. It was infuriating how easily he slipped into every role, every room. And every time I saw him with Isabella, his beautiful partner in crime, the bitterness simmered beneath my surface. I refused to fall for his game, and I despised every flicker of doubt he managed to plant in me. Coffee? His voice startled me one evening as I gathered my things. I glanced at him, incredulous. No, I said flatly. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Tremor. The year-end ceremony brought a moment of recognition I had longed for. I made it into the top 10 best employees of the year. As I stood on the stage, accepting the accolade, I thought to myself, not bad. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. The real challenge, the truly bad thing, was announced moments later. I had been assigned to work with him, Adrian Ross. The task was clear. We were to secure a deal with one of the firm's most critical clients. Before the meeting, we arranged to meet and discuss our strategy. But, as expected, our exchange was brief, direct, and as impersonal as it could get. Here's the plan, Adrian said, his voice clipped as he handed me a file. We were sitting across from each other in a small conference room, surrounded by walls that seemed to emphasize our lack of warmth. Understood, I replied, scanning the details quickly. Anything else? Nothing more. Just stick to your strengths. His gaze was cool, professional. Of course, I shot back, my voice as steady as I could make it. His eyebrow lifted in what might have been amusement, or irritation. It was always hard to tell with him. The day of the meeting, I chose my outfit carefully. A sleek, dark blue dress that balanced professionalism and confidence. As Adrian pulled up to my apartment in his black sedan, I walked out with purpose. He didn't say a word, just opened the passenger door with a curt nod. As we drove, the silence stretched. I focused on the passing streets until he finally broke it. Let's make this work, he said, eyes fixed on the road. Let's hope you don't make it harder than it has to be, I replied, not missing a beat. His jaw tensed slightly, but he said nothing. When we arrived at the restaurant, a high-end place known for its exclusivity, we were escorted to a private room. The decor was elegant, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and expensive wine. We sat across from each other at the long table, waiting for the client to arrive. Minutes passed, then half an hour, then an hour. Still, no one. I shifted in my seat, trying to avoid eye contact. The silence thickened. Finally, he broke it. You seem tense, Adrian said, leaning back in his chair. I met his gaze, unfazed. You seem smug, he chuckled, a low sound that filled the otherwise quiet room. So, you really don't like me, do you? I shrugged, crossing my arms. I don't waste time on things that don't matter. His eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, a news alert about a recent earthquake. Have you seen this? I asked, holding the phone towards him. He barely had time to lean in when the ground beneath us shuddered. It felt like a truck had passed by at first, but the tremors quickly grew. The chandelier above us swayed violently. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a tremor, it was an earthquake. Get under the table, Adrian shouted, his hand on my arm, pulling me down just as debris started to fall. We scrambled beneath the heavy wooden table. The world seemed to roar around us, the walls shaking, the floor quaking. I could hear my own rapid breathing mixing with the chaos. Adrian's arm braced protectively over me, shielding me from falling fragments. For a minute, everything was raw panic. And then, silence. I realized I was pressed close against him. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my face, see every detail of his eyes, sharp, bright, and focused entirely on me. My heart pounded, the sensation overwhelming, more intense than the earthquake itself. Are you okay? He whispered, his voice low and almost gentle. I'm fine, I stammered, but as I tried to move, I knocked my head against the table's edge. Pain shot through me, and I winced. Careful, His hand reached up, his fingers lightly brushing the spot where I'd hit my head. "Does it hurt?" The unexpected softness in his voice caught me off guard. I felt my cheeks flush. "I'm fine," I repeated, pulling back, suddenly acutely aware of the closeness between us. We crawled out from under the table, both of us a little shaken, a lot awkward. The drive back was quiet, both of us lost in thought. When I finally made it home, I flopped onto my bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the scene over and over, the tremors, his eyes, the breathless moment beneath the table. "Disgusting," I muttered to myself, louder than intended. "What?" my roommate called from the other room, startled. "Nothing," I shouted back, burying my face in my pillow. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the memory, or the way my heart had raced. Chapter 3. Drowning in Mischief. After that day, I avoided Adrian Ross more than ever. I became a master at ducking around corners, taking the long way to meetings, and burying myself in work whenever I sensed his presence nearby. I kept my interactions strictly professional, nodding curtly whenever he passed, and making sure to stay surrounded by colleagues during team gatherings. But he didn't make it easy. "Miss Mia," I heard his smooth, teasing voice behind me one afternoon. I ignored it, tapping furiously at my keyboard. "Do you remember what happened the other day?" he pressed, a hint of amusement dancing in his words. I gritted my teeth, refusing to turn around. The next day, a bouquet of bright yellow roses appeared on my desk. I stared at them, then at the small note tucked inside. "Your rudeness is quite charming." A dot, I picked up the flowers, walked briskly to the break room, and tossed them straight into the trash. He caught me as I was walking out. "Roses not your thing?" he asked, a half smirk on his face. "I prefer silence," I replied coldly, brushing past him. His attempts continued. A cappuccino waiting on my desk with "Heroine of the Day" scribbled on the cup in Sharpie. A box of chocolates labeled, "In case you need to sweeten your day." Each gesture was met with the same icy response. I threw away the coffee, passed the chocolates to a colleague, and ignored his knowing glances. The more I avoided him, the more determined he seemed. It was infuriating. Adrian Ross was relentless. Then came the company's team-building retreat, a trip to a lakeside resort in the countryside. The fresh air and open skies were a welcome change from the city's suffocating pace. We played games, enjoyed group activities, and indulged in good food until everyone was exhausted. As evening approached, I slipped away for a quiet walk, craving a moment of peace. The air was crisp, the lake reflecting the soft light of the setting sun. I took a deep breath, savoring the stillness. The city could feel so draining at times. As I wandered along the lake's edge, a sudden commotion caught my attention. Someone was splashing frantically in the water, arms flailing. Panic twisted in my gut when I recognized him, Adrian. His shouts for help echoed across the quiet water. I didn't hesitate. Growing up in a riverside town had made swimming second nature. I kicked off my shoes, dove in, and reached him quickly. His grip was surprisingly strong as I pulled him back to shore, water streaming from both of us as we collapsed on the sand. He was motionless, eyes closed, face pale. My heart pounded. "Adrian!" I slapped his face lightly, then harder. "Wake up, you idiot!" Nothing. Fear clawed at me, and I leaned down, pressing my lips to his for rescue breaths. 1, 2, 3 minutes passed. I was starting to lose hope when I felt it. His lips curved into a smile beneath mine. I pulled back, realization and fury crashing over me. You were faking?" I sputtered. His eyes opened, mischievous and bright. "Not entirely. I needed saving." Words failed me. The realization that he had stolen my first kiss like this, so shamelessly, made my blood boil. "I can't believe you." The noise had drawn a crowd. My colleagues gathered around, some laughing, some cheering, and in the midst of it all, Isabella stood with eyes that burned into me, her expression cold and sharp. On the ride back to the city, I tried to isolate myself. I chose a window seat and wrapped myself in silence. But of course, Adrian wasn't done. He slipped into the seat next to me, his presence infuriatingly calm. Thanks for saving my life, he said, his voice low and teasing. I glared at him, seething. How dare you trick me? I wasn't entirely faking, he protested, a mock-innocent look on his face. There were real moments of peril. You're still lying, I hissed. What was the point of all this? He leaned closer, a playful smile on his lips. I was drowning, in love, with you. My face burned. I pulled my jacket over my head, desperate to block him out. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a response. But beneath my embarrassment, my heart pounded in a way that had nothing to do with the bumpy ride back. Chapter 4. The Gamble. A new opportunity presented itself in the form of Alexander Bennett, a man whose entrance into the company was nothing short of a spectacle. As he strode through the lobby, conversations hushed and heads turned. That's Alexander Bennett, whispered a colleague beside me, awe in her voice. He's the chairman of Bennett Holdings. I understood the reaction. Alexander was strikingly handsome, with a polished, charismatic presence that made him seem every bit the successful, trustworthy executive. When I learned he had requested a meeting with me after reviewing the company's top performers, it felt like winning the lottery. If this deal succeeded, it could transform my career overnight. My excitement was palpable. Adrian, however, didn't share in my enthusiasm. After the meeting, he pulled me aside, his expression unreadable, but his tone hard. I don't think you should work with Bennett. I frowned, crossing my arms. Why not? I've looked into his company, Adrian said, his eyes locking with mine. Bennett Holdings is on the verge of bankruptcy. There are whispers about fraudulent practices, deals that collapse and leave partners with nothing. I scoffed, though his words gnawed at me. You're just trying to sabotage this. He's nothing like you. He's warm, approachable, and trustworthy. His jaw clenched. I'm trying to protect you. This isn't about me. But I wouldn't listen. The potential commission was too tempting, too life-changing to walk away from on hearsay. I dismissed his warning and resolved to proceed with the contract. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I couldn't let doubt, or Adrian, ruin it. The day of the contract signing arrived. Adrian insisted on accompanying me. I'm coming with you, he said firmly. No, I snapped, but he didn't back down. I just want to make sure you're safe, he said quietly. I won't interfere. Reluctantly, I agreed, though irritation simmered beneath the surface. As he picked me up, I climbed into his car, muttering, "Let's hope we don't have another disaster like last time." He shot me a sidelong glance, a small smile playing at his lips. Who knows? Maybe a meteorite will strike this time. I glared at him, but couldn't suppress a tiny smile of my own. At the upscale restaurant, Alexander was already waiting, seated with a calm smile that made him appear even more genuine. His expression faltered slightly when he noticed Adrian, but he quickly recovered, extending his hand in greeting. The three of us settled in, and negotiations began. I couldn't hide my excitement. This deal was going to change everything. As I skimmed through the contract's terms, Adrian's warnings echoed faintly in my mind. For a moment, doubt crept in. If this was a scam, I could lose everything. My career, my freedom. But I pushed the thought aside. Alexander exuded sincerity, and I couldn't let paranoia get in the way. Just as I lifted the pen to sign, a piercing fire alarm blared throughout the restaurant. Startled, we jumped to our feet. Chaos erupted as diners rushed for the exits. Alexander grabbed my arm, urging me toward the door. Adrian's hand found my other arm, guiding me through the crowd. 10 tense minutes passed before the manager announced it had been a false alarm, just a malfunctioning sensor. We returned to our seats, adrenaline still coursing through me. Determined not to let anything derail the moment again, I quickly signed the contract. On the drive back, I was jubilant. I did it, I exclaimed, grinning at Adrian. Contract signed, life changed. He glanced at me, a small smile curving his lips. Congratulations. I hope it brings you everything you want. I frowned, feeling a mix of triumph and unease. Why do I feel like nothing good happens when you're around? I teased, though the words held a hint of truth. Adrian chuckled softly, the sound low and genuine. Bad luck, I suppose. His response was light, but his quiet gaze made my chest tighten. For a moment, the tension between us softened, replaced by something I didn't quite understand. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. A week after signing the contract with Alexander Bennett, the news came like a tidal wave. Bennett Holdings was a scam. Reports flashed across news channels and industry bulletins, revealing that the entire company was a shell, propped up by lies and false promises. They had siphoned funds, leaving nothing behind but debts and ruined reputations. My heart stopped as I read the headlines, my hands trembling. I had signed the deal. I had been the one to put my name, and the company's name, on the line. The floor beneath me felt like it had given way. My colleagues' voices buzzed around me, but they were distant, mere static against the rush of panic in my head. As the full weight of what had happened sank in, my legs gave out. I sank to the ground, hands covering my face as hot tears spilled over. "I'm finished," I whispered, the words barely audible. "Everything's over." Colleagues gathered around, offering pats on the back, words of encouragement that felt hollow and useless. "It wasn't your fault," someone said. "You couldn't have known." But their pity only deepened the ache. I should have known. I should have listened. Adrian's warning replayed in my mind, sharp and accusing. I had ignored him. I had trusted a facade and led myself straight into a trap. And now, the fallout was mine to bear. When the office emptied out that night, I stayed. Hours passed, the city outside slipping into darkness, but I didn't move. I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the scattered papers, unable to muster the strength to go home. What was the point? Everything I had worked for, every ounce of respect I had earned, had been reduced to ash. I buried my face in my arms, feeling the exhaustion drag me down. The tears returned, heavy and unrelenting, until I had no energy left to cry. The silence in the office pressed down on me, suffocating. "Staying late again?" The voice startled me, rough with fatigue but unmistakably familiar. I looked up to see Adrian standing in the doorway, his silhouette outlined by the dim glow of the hallway lights. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "Go home," I muttered, my voice cracking. "I don't need you here." He didn't move. "I'm not leaving." I tried to ignore him, but the dam inside me broke. "I ruined everything," I said, my voice shaking. I believed him. I let everyone down. "No," he said simply, walking closer. "You didn't." I shook my head, the tears spilling over again. "You warned me. You told me he was a fraud, and I didn't listen. It's my fault." Adrian didn't say anything for a moment. Then, slowly, he pulled a chair over and sat beside me. His presence was steady, like an anchor in the storm raging inside me. "You trusted someone who seemed genuine," he said softly. "That doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human." His words cut through the fog of my self-loathing. I met his gaze, searching for any sign of mockery, but there was none, just quiet understanding. "I don't know how to fix this," I whispered. "Maybe you don't have to," he replied. "Sometimes, things aren't meant to be fixed alone." I tried to hold back, but the weight was too much. I sobbed, harder than I had in years. And then, without hesitation, Adrian moved closer, wrapping his arms around me. His embrace was warm, solid, and it broke down every last wall I had tried to keep up. I clung to him, my tears soaking his shirt, but he didn't pull away. He just held me, letting me fall apart. Eventually, the exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, my head resting against his shoulder. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the windows, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. I was still in the office, crumpled in a chair, but a blanket, Adrian's jacket, was draped over my shoulders. As I sat up, a commotion in the hallway caught my attention. Voices rose, excited and urgent. I followed the sound and found myself standing in front of the conference room, where several colleagues were gathered around a television screen. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice rough from crying. One of them turned, eyes wide. "It's about Bennett Holdings. Turns out the contract you signed was a fake." My breath caught. "What?" "The authorities discovered it this morning," another added. "The real contract wasn't processed. Whatever deal they tried to make, it was just for show. You're in the clear." The relief was overwhelming. I staggered back, replaying the events in my mind. I had seen the contract, scrutinized every line, but in the chaos of that fire alarm, my thoughts sharpened, and a realization hit me like a lightning bolt. Adrian. During the false fire alarm, he'd been by my side. He had steered me through the chaos. He was the only one who could have swapped the contracts. Later that day, I found him in his office, going over reports as if nothing had happened. He looked up when I entered, his expression calm but watchful. "You," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "You swapped the contracts." He didn't deny it. "You're welcome." I stepped closer, the gratitude and emotions swirling inside me too complex to name. "Thank you," I whispered. He stood, walking around the desk until he was in front of me. To my surprise, he lowered himself to one knee and held up a small box with a delicate silver necklace inside. "Be with me," he said softly. "Not just as colleagues or allies. Be with me." Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time, they were tears of relief and something like happiness. I nodded, unable to speak. The next day, Adrian made an announcement to the entire company. "Everyone," he said, his voice carrying through the room, "I'd like you to know that Mia Parker is now my girlfriend." The room erupted in murmurs and whispers, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the steady warmth of his hand in mine. Chapter 6. Through the Fire. Our love was a storm, wild, uncontainable, and all-consuming. I had spent so long convincing myself that I was immune to Adrian's charm, but the walls I had built crumbled one by one. What began as sparks turned into a blaze. We were like moths drawn to a flame, unable to resist the pull. When we were together, the world melted away, leaving only the warmth of his touch and the fire in his eyes. I was completely lost in him. Adrian was more than just magnetic. Beneath his confident exterior, he was thoughtful, fiercely loyal, and surprisingly tender. He made me laugh when I thought I couldn't, and he listened when I needed it most. He challenged me to be better, and I found myself falling deeper with every passing day. The moments we stole for ourselves were precious. Dinners where we talked until dawn, quiet evenings spent tangled together, and promises whispered in the dark. But like any fire, it could not burn forever without the risk of being extinguished. One morning, everything changed. It began with whispers that grew into a roar. The stock market had crashed. News spread like wildfire, announcing a global financial catastrophe. Investors panicked, businesses crumbled, and fortunes were wiped out overnight. Adrian walked into my apartment that morning, with shoulders slumped and eyes hollow. He had lost everything. "I'm in debt, Mia," he said, voice raw and heavy with defeat. An unimaginable amount. It happened so fast. I tried to protect the firm, but I stared at him, trying to process his words. The confident, unshakable man I knew now seemed like a shell of himself. "How much?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "More than I can ever repay," he admitted, his head bowing as if the weight of the world pressed down on him. "I'm sorry." Tears welled up in my eyes. I closed the distance between us, wrapping my arms around him tightly. "We'll get through this," I said, my words muffled against his chest. "I'm not going anywhere." In the weeks that followed, Adrian spiraled. The burden of debt crushed him, and he slipped into a darkness I had never seen before. He drank to numb the pain, coming home late with glassy eyes and unsteady steps. It hurt to watch him like that, to see the man I loved drowning in despair. But I stayed. Every night, I stayed. I'd guide him to bed when he was too weak to stand, clean up the shattered glass when he threw it in frustration, and hold him when he finally broke down. One night, he collapsed onto the sofa, eyes rimmed red. I knelt in front of him, taking his hands in mine. "Why are you still here?" he asked, his voice low and cracked. "You don't deserve this. I'm not who I was anymore. I can't give you what you had. I'm nothing." The pain in his words cut deep, but I held his gaze. "I don't care," I said firmly. "I've been through worse, Adrian. I grew up with nothing. I know what it's like to fight, to struggle. You'll rebuild. You're not nothing to me." He stared at me for a long time, as if searching for a hint of doubt, but there was none. Finally, his grip tightened on my hands. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Too bad," I said, a small smile breaking through my tears. "You're stuck with me." In that moment, something shifted. The weight on his shoulders seemed a fraction lighter, and he pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. "I'll make it right," he promised. "I don't know how, but I will. I believe you." Chapter 7. Shattered Trust. The day felt oddly quiet. The weight of everything Adrian and I had been through still hung over me, but there was a glimmer of hope as we worked through the aftermath of the financial crisis together. Yet something about his mood today seemed different. He was restless, pacing around the room, eyes clouded with worry. "Mia," Adrian finally spoke, breaking the silence. His voice was low, hesitant. I turned to him, sensing that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "There's something I need to tell you." I folded my arms, wary. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "The market crash. I knew it was coming. I pulled my investments before it hit." The words hung in the air between us. "You what?" I whispered, a mix of shock and disbelief washing over me. "I knew," he repeated, eyes never leaving mine. "I wasn't in debt. I wasn't ruined. I wanted you to believe I had lost everything, because I needed to know where you stood." The realization hit like a punch to the gut. You tested me," I said, my voice rising with every word. "You made me watch you fall apart, made me think we were losing everything, just to test me?" "I had to," he said, his face twisted with regret. "Isabella planted doubts in my mind. She said you were only with me for the money. I needed to be sure she was wrong." My chest tightened, fury boiling over. "You let me suffer. You lied to me. And for what? Because someone whispered lies in your ear?" I stepped back, shaking my head. "All this time, I thought we were in this together, but you were just playing games." "Mia, please." Adrian's voice cracked. "I made a mistake. I doubted you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But you have to understand." "No," I interrupted, tears burning in my eyes. "You don't get to justify this. You pretended to be broken, you pretended to need me, and it was all a lie. Everything between us. Was it ever real, Adrian?" He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice trembling. "I trusted you. Before you walk away," he pleaded. "Just listen." He gestured toward the door, and a man I recognized, Marcus, one of Adrian's closest colleagues, stepped inside. He carried a folder and a hard expression. "Show her," Adrian said quietly. Marcus placed it on the table. I opened it with trembling hands. The first pages were messages, fake texts and emails, supposedly from me, discussing Adrian's finances in cold, calculating terms. "Once he's fully committed, I'll make sure I'm set," one message read. Another said, "I need access to his accounts. He trusts me too much." I shook my head, bile rising in my throat. "This isn't me. This is a lie." "There's more," Marcus said, his voice heavy. He showed me surveillance photos of me in supposedly compromising situations. In one, I appeared to be meeting with a financial advisor. In another, I was seen entering a luxury boutique with a friend who worked in high-end fashion. Another coincidence, Isabella had twisted to suit her narrative. The setup was meticulous, each detail carefully crafted to paint me as a gold digger. "She orchestrated everything," Marcus said. "Isabella created these fake messages, staged those photos, and even intercepted your conversations. Her goal was to tear you and Adrian apart." I felt the room tilt around me. Every accusation, every seed of doubt, Isabella had planted them with precision. I turned to Adrian, pain searing through me. "And you believed her?" He stepped closer, but I held up a hand. "Don't. Mia, I know I messed up. I doubted you when I shouldn't have. I let my own fear get the best of me." His voice cracked. "But I never stopped loving you." I shook my head, fury and heartbreak battling within me. "You let her poison us. You let her make me out to be a liar. You broke my trust." "I know," he whispered. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it right, if you let me." "I don't know if I can," I said, my voice trembling. "You put me through hell. And for what? Because of some fake messages?" I was scared, he said, his own eyes shining with tears. Scared of losing you, of being used. I was a fool. Too little, too late, I said, my voice breaking. Get out. He hesitated, but saw the resolve in my eyes. With one final pained look, he turned and walked away. Chapter 8. Where it all began. For the next month, I buried myself in work, trying to forget. Adrian tried reaching out, notes, flowers, messages, but I ignored them all. I was too hurt, too angry. Then, one evening, a small box appeared on my doorstep. Inside was a simple note. Meet me where it all began. I knew exactly where that was. The top floor of our office building, the elegant event space where the company had hosted the welcome party for new employees. It was there that I had first met Adrian Ross. There where he had captivated and frustrated me in equal measure. Memories of that night, and everything that followed, came rushing back. I shouldn't have gone. But curiosity, and something more, drew me in. The top floor was empty and bathed in soft light, just as it had been on that first night. I stepped in cautiously, feeling the weight of every memory. As I approached the large floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city, my breath caught. Across the street, a massive billboard lit up, each word blazing in the night. I'm sorry for hurting you, Mia. I love you. Tears blurred my vision. The words, so simple yet so powerful, broke down every last wall I had tried to keep up. I turned and saw Adrian standing a few feet away, his eyes filled with hope and remorse. I meant every word, he said, stepping closer. I was a fool, Mia. I let fear and doubt get in the way, but I've never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. I wanted to hold on to my anger, to the pain of betrayal, but standing there, under the city lights with him, all I felt was the pull of everything we'd been through together. The love, the heartbreak, the hope that refused to die. Do you think it's that easy? I asked, my voice shaking. You hurt me, Adrian. I know, he whispered, his eyes never leaving mine. I was wrong, so wrong, and I'll spend every day proving I can be the man you deserve. For a long moment, we stood in silence. Then slowly, I took a step forward, and another, until there was no space between us. I looked into his eyes, saw the sincerity and the regret, and I let the last of my walls crumble. Don't mess this up again, I said softly, tears slipping down my cheeks. I won't, he promised, his voice rough with emotion. He reached for me, and I let him. Our arms wrapped around each other, and as his lips met mine, I felt the weight of everything. The past, the pain, the love we had fought so hard for, melt away.